But I just want to make sure, because we have so much on the demo in this hour, that we get through everything. So rather than waiting for a big start. A couple of things before we do get started, just to sort of give you the context of this demo. That's strictly what it is. We wanted to take the opportunity to show you some of the basics of the self-service functionality in PeopleSoft SA. What this does not do is show you exactly how it will look when you're navigating, you and the other users in your departments will be navigating in the system as we go live and you move forward doing advising and registration and scheduling related activities around this. We are working with our portal team to basically provide links that are very similar to what you have now in MyUMBC that you will use to navigate within this system. So as we go through our demo today and we switch accounts and we navigate on the sidebar and that kind of thing, don't get hung up on that or worry about it. The other thing to remember too is just, very clear, this isn't a training, so don't feel like you have to know exactly, that you have to walk away knowing how to do all of the functionality that we're demonstrating. Some of the things in here, we will have follow-up classroom training on, we will have webinars available, there will be various opportunities and mechanisms to deliver training and instruction around how to actually use each piece of the system. There's no way that we could train in everything that we're going to cover and let you see here today in an hour and expect you to actually walk out and be able to do it. So I just wanted to be clear that that wasn't the expectation and have anybody feeling that way. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started. I will ask again, just to make sure that we get through everything. We want questions, but we will ask if you can please hold them until the end, and then we'll leave some time available to talk again. Just want to make sure that we get to show you everything that we wanted to share with you today. And with that, what we're going to do is just sort of kind of walk through a couple of common scenarios that we think faculty, advisors, and others in the academic departments encounter when working with students, and sort of show you what those would look like in the PeopleSoft system. The first would be basically walking through, we've sort of created a scenario where we have someone who is an instructor here at UMBC in a fall semester, so he's teaching some courses. He is also an advisor who is advising students to enroll in the upcoming spring semester. So the first part of this is sort of he's working individually with a student who has come in for advising to talk about what he's completed so far, what he should take in the upcoming semester, and get his advising clearance. So the first piece, I'm going to turn it over to Katie, who is our degree audit specialist, and will be working, if she hasn't already, some of you she may already have met with, if you happen to be in the role of the degree audit contact for your department, to show you some of the pieces of the system that allow you to go in and look at information about what a student has already done, specifically their transfer credit report and their degree audit.
And pretty much what I've done, I've signed into the system right now as the student. So the student will have self-service functions where they can view their transfer credit report. As soon as actually they're admitted to the university, they can have a report that's viewable for them. And then once they're at orientation with their advisor, they'll officially matriculate into the university. But what I wanted to show you was the transfer credit report that they would view. So as a student, and they would probably use MyUMBC to navigate through all of this.
The students will as well. They'll get it through the portal as well.
Yeah, it'll be the same. We'll minimize this. So the student can see the different universities that they had attended. So here we can see Emory University is the first institution, and some of the coursework that they had taken at Emory, the credits they had taken the courses for, the grades they received, the equivalent course at UMBC, the units associated with that transfer, and once again, you can see the grade that we've given them, although grades still don't transfer. It's not going to come into their GPA. And now you can see a letter T next to the grade. So that way you know immediately this course the student has taken is a transfer course. And you'll see this later on in the degree audit report. It'll be important that we can see that quickly via the grade. But in this example from Emory University, the student took Math 216, and we were able to give them a direct equivalent of Math 155. You can see Psych 211, there's Psych 210 at UMBC. Now here's a history course, though, History 204, where we've accepted it. The university's accepted it. You can see the units have come over, but you're seeing this notation of transubmit. We still have that process, the course description review process, available through the registrar's office for a student to submit more information on a transfer course in order to get a direct equivalent if we can't award that to them up front, or if as evaluators we feel like we can give them something more, we can request that up front by assigning this designation to a course. So you could potentially see this, at orientation, some courses that are noted with this term. And so then the student knows that there's another step that has to take place. They would have to submit information to the registrar's office in order for it to continue. The next university, Tennessee Tech University, you can see some work here. Oh, actually, I shouldn't even skip over this. Business 292, no rule. If there's a course that does not have a structured rule in this database system, now we're able to sort of write rules into the system to streamline transfer credit. If there's not something automatic that the system can pick up, it will say no rule. So nothing transfers until the transfer evaluation team goes over it to give it some sort of answer. Maybe they'll determine that the course is non-transferable. Maybe they'll ask for the course description by putting transubmit there. Or maybe they'll take that Business 292 as an ECAD course, maybe just a lower level elective. But if you ever come to a point with a student where you're looking over the coursework and you see something that says no rule, you'll know that it hasn't yet been touched. Someone has not looked at it to fully evaluate it. So that's what it would look like. Okay. Tennessee Tech University, you can see many courses that are posted here, but here's an example of a course that a student took, Biology 199 at Tennessee, where we were able to give them 2 courses at UMBC, not just one. So this is what that would look like now. Biology 304 and Biology 108, and this is just sort of a fun example. It's not real. It's just so you're prepared. English 211, SOCI 111, and Georgia Institute of Technology, we also went through and we had some direct equivalents associated. If they were not direct equivalents, you would see examples of that too. And it would say, in this example, Art 106, Art 100, it could say Art lower level elective instead. So you're not going to see stars anymore on a student's transfer credit report. If a student had test credits, that could appear under this area, and any other credits that could be associated with the student would be listed here. After the students viewed that information, they can go and look at how all this would fit at UMBC by looking at their degree audit report, which is what I'll be working with a lot of you on. And let me just collapse all of these headers. Within the degree audit report, a lot of items will be covered, unlike MAP right now, where really you're getting bits and pieces of information. You might look at the undergraduate progress report separately from the transfer courses list, and you'll have to sort of put together a complete picture for the student's major. In the degree audit, you can see the undergraduate graduation requirements. So those are the overall requirements, the 120 credit requirement, all of that general education program. There's some other headers that we can put in, or that we can build into the system. This is an example of courses not used to satisfy general education requirements. So you can see a complete listing of what would not be included in the previous lists. Whatever major the student has declared, and any minors or certificates the student would have declared as well. So we'll look through each one. With the first, as I started to mention, you can see the 120 units with a minimum of 2.0 GPA, final 30 units in residence, the writing intensive requirement, 2 phys ed courses, and the 45 units of upper level credit. So those are just the overall university requirements. But if you wanted to get into detail and see what courses are being used towards each area, you can open out these carets and look at all the coursework that the system is reading and tallying. And so here you can see the 120 units required, 50 are taken, 70 are needed. It mentions the GPA, and you can see these notations. There's a check mark for if a student has taken the course, it's complete, if the course is in progress. And so you can already see that here. There are some courses the student has in progress or they've signed up for, and the ones they've completed. And immediately you can see BT. That's a transfer course. You can see all the transfer courses or know that these are transfer courses. And these are UMBC equivalents that are appearing here. So the only way you would know is if you saw that grade. Final 30 units in residence. Let's go over that one. Writing intensive, it says it's not satisfied, and it tells you why. 2 phys ed courses. And this one's saying it's not satisfied. The student's going to be taking bowling, in the spring. That's in progress. 45 units of upper level credit. And right now they've got that one. Okay. So the next header for general education program, it explains the general education program for the students so they understand what it is that they're following. There's this English composition area. It's saying it's satisfied. Once an area is deemed satisfied by degree audit, it can close out, so the student doesn't have to necessarily see the courses, doesn't take up room immediately. But if you wanted to see that they didn't indeed fulfill it, you could open it up and see. They had taken English 100A. Arts and Humanities, satisfied. And these are the courses the student has in progress that's satisfying that area. And of course, if they don't do well, then that disappears. So they won't be satisfied any longer, but just so the student can project. It's our math course, filled by a transfer course. Sciences, and when it's not satisfied and there are no courses being used towards that area, nothing will show. And this is also specifying in the culture area that this is the Bachelor of Arts student, so there are 2 courses required of them for the culture area. And then language with the 201 level. So they'll be finishing that out in the spring. The next area, courses not used to satisfy general education requirements. Let's open that out. It goes over all the courses. So that way, if you want to look over everything and just be sure everything's being used the way that you want it to or the student wants it to be used, you can have a quick look over all of the students' excess courses. They're not appearing in that list. The next area, philosophy major. The students declared philosophy. And it talks about the philosophy major at the top. We can say as much or as little as we'd like, as we would like there. In this example, in philosophy, they have different areas within the major: logic, ethics, and history of philosophy. So in this case, there's this one course that's required for the logic area, but in their next area, ethics, they require only one course, but the student could maybe choose from a list, one course they could choose from a list in this area. So the student is going to take Philosophy 350, but because the list is so short, this department thought it might be a good idea. You could just show the list immediately for the student to choose from. It doesn't remain bare, so the student doesn't really know what their choices are. If this were a very, very, very long list the student could choose from, then we may not show that in the degree audit report, just so it's not too much for them to see. Sort of like in the general education requirements, we don't list all the AH courses the student has an option to take. We just list the ones that they are taking. So that's pretty much it. I mean, for that area, and then for the minor as well, it can reflect the same way that a major does. It can get as detailed as we would need it to be, or as broad as we would need it to be. And I think that's it. Yeah. Do you want to wait till the end for questions, or do you want to just switch?
While I'm logging in, if you have questions regarding the transfer credit and degree audit piece that we just saw while we're switching logins here, we can go ahead and do that.
Yeah, because you probably have things immediately.
The timeline and the expectations. The majors and minors won't be there in March. They'll be there in October. General education and the overall graduation requirements will be there for the advanced registration period in March for fall of 2009, and the majors, minors, and certificates will be there, and that's what all the meetings are about. Will be there in October for the spring 10 advanced registration period.
Okay, I got 2 comments. The first one is, it's strange that it says that it's satisfied when they're actually in progress. So it's just funny that they can be like, oh, well, I'm done with arts and humanities, but yeah.
Yeah, I was looking at that as well. Vicki and I were going over it, so I could talk to her about maybe that.
Just maybe a word like pending, or I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's I don't think there's an option for pending, but maybe.
Hearing
but yeah, and I know that
That would be rather difficult.
Yeah.
To do.
But it does fall in line with other PeopleSoft things, like you can satisfy a prereq with an in-progress course. So it shows, so it lets you register for the next course, even though the other one's I mean, it's a standard, it's not just in degree audit, it's sort of, that kind of logic permeates PeopleSoft.
It assumes if you register for a course that you get at least this FED or FSE if you need.
Whatever the requirement is.
Yeah.
But gotta assume something.
And then my other question is the advising profile kind of going to be linked into it so we can see, okay, they haven't completed English, but what is their placement, or math, and what's their placement?
Right, those items, placement items, will appear actually elsewhere. I know through the faculty self-service in MyUMBC, you should have some sort of link there that will take you to that information. But on the degree audit report itself, it doesn't reflect that information. But I have been talking to Vicki about how we can make that easier. We have to see how the MyUMBC portal is going to be set up and how those links are going to be grouped together to make it a little bit easier for you to get back and forth when viewing those items. But I know another piece would be high school proficiency for language. So we've been talking about that and working pretty hard on trying to figure out how to reflect that in the best way. Maybe on the degree audit report. So it's very quick for you to see that it's sort of satisfied because of the high school language proficiency or native language proficiency.
And there are some courses that are both maybe a culture and an AH, and you had said you can look at degree audit and check to make sure it's placed where the student wants it placed. If it's not, how does the student change that?
Well, I know the degree audit's going to sort of do the best fit possible. So it'll move things around as the student's taking courses. So say at one point the course is being used in arts and humanities, but it's also a culture. If later on the student takes another course and sort of bumps it out, of arts and humanities, it'll fall into culture if there's a hole there. So degree audit's going to go through logically where the first empty spots are and just sort of fill in that way. If something's really unsatisfactory for some reason, it's just no, I need this to be a certain way. We would need to basically create a business process where you would communicate to me, the advisor would communicate to me in the registrar's office where I could possibly adjust the report or just tweak it for that student. Any other questions?
And if you think of anything, I said at the end we'll take more questions certainly about the rest of it as well as anything else that we go through. If you were thinking about an advising scenario for registration for an upcoming term, if the student is, once you've looked at where the student is, you want to sort of see where they're going in terms of the courses that are available for the upcoming semester. So let's take a look at our class search, our view of the schedule of classes. Say in working with this particular student, he expressed an interest in ancient studies because that happens to be what we've created some test courses for in this particular test database. And we're looking at the spring 2009 term. And you just choose your course subject. If you're looking for a particular course number, if the question you're getting from the student, or if you're trying to advise someone into something you know they need to take, you can search for the exact course. But if you're just trying to see what is that department offering in the spring, or that subject offering in the spring, then just with this information, you can go ahead and search. And you'll get a full list with some very basic information of the courses that are being offered in that term, in that subject. And you can see just the basics, what the course is, the times, the instructor. We can see that Michael here is teaching earliest Christianity. He didn't know it, but he is. If you want to drill down into more detail, you just click on the link by section. And then you can see all of the detailed information about the course, including the class capacity and how many seats are currently available based on how many students have registered. If the course has a wait list, you're able to see how many places there are in the wait list and how many people are on the wait list so far as well.
And I'm going to go back up to class search just to show you that's sort of the basic search. You want to look at a subject, or you're looking for a particular course number. You and students in self-service as well will also have the opportunity to drill down into their search So if a student is looking for courses that meet within a particular time frame, they've fleshed out their schedule and they know they have a 3-hour window open and they're looking for a particular course, or they can only be here particular times. If they are looking for, we have very limited, but if you have a student who is looking for online courses, you can drill down and strictly search for those types of things. The other thing that we will be doing, we have modified the search a little bit to allow us to do something that we got feedback would be very helpful for people. If you're trying to advise a student who is missing some general requirements into what they still need to take, you can actually search for courses that are available around those general requirements. So to do that, you would basically just, okay, general education, it's a GEP student. They started after fall of 2007, and he needs an arts and humanities. You do that, you can refine your search, choose your, if they want to know what is philosophy offering or what is English offering in arts and humanities or culture this term, you can do that as well. So you can narrow down the search in ways that help you work with the student that you're working with, and students can do that on their own as well. So after reviewing the schedule, generally sort of, I guess, the next logical step in terms of the advising for registration process is giving the student advising clearance, at least when we're talking about degree-seeking undergraduates in the fall and spring semester. And that was actually a process that was not delivered in PeopleSoft Functionality. It was another modification that we requested because we knew it was a practice that as an institution we wanted to continue to be able to provide that clearance for our undergraduate students, which is why you see in the menu now the custom items and Salisbury mod. We promise that's not what it will be called in your link. It will be called Grant Students Advise, or Grant Advising Authorization, Provide Advising Clearance, something that actually makes sense to you there. And what that brings in, it was Michael's idea now. And I'm putting in his EMPL ID because I have it, but you can search by last name, first name, or campus ID. And campus ID is the information that is on the student's ID card. Or actually on your ID card as well. We all have a campus ID.
We're really pushing across all systems that that's going to be the identifier that we're going to be using for, so we're still in a little bit of the process. Not every student knows, but they'll know because that's what they're going to be using for all kinds of things. And it's, if they don't know that, it's on their card.
And I did not choose this particular student because the whole English department is here today. I didn't realize that as I was coming in, Joe English major, but hey, it worked. And basically what you'll do is very similar to what advisors do now. All you'll need to do is, in this case, because I've used Joe in some other demos, he already is eligible to enroll, but when an advisor goes in and this student has not yet been advised, that checkbox will not be checked on. They'll just click it on, hit save, save it, and Joe's status changes to eligible to enroll so that he can go in and register. That does not mean that if Joe has a financial hold because he hasn't paid last semester's tuition or whatever, that he will be able to register. Those are other holds that will still be in place, but this is where we will provide the advising clearance. And let's just say that in the course of your advising session, Joe has chosen a couple of courses to take in the upcoming semester that he's also going to need permission for, and you happen to be someone who is also able to grant permission for those courses. Either you're the instructor or you're a person in that department who's allowed to provide clearances for those courses. And so while you're working with Joe, you're also going to clear him to register. And we do actually have a whole separate hour-long lunch and learn going on course permissions. So if you're more interested in getting into more level of detail about those are out there. There's one more next week, and then there's another one in January. I'd encourage you to sign up and join us for those. Whoops, and I went to the wrong place. And basically what this search brings you to is this is where you're searching for the course that you want to give permission for.
Just to give you kind of the idea what it will be like, on the portal you will have a link that says register, give me a Google class permissions, whatever, and I'll throw you to that page immediately. That search page.
And in this particular case, this particular course, Ancient Studies 301 for the spring term, has been deemed permission required by the department. So behind the scenes, as our schedule of classes was being built, the department set this course up as permission required, and so no student can enter this particular course without getting permission. And basically, in a scenario like that where the course is permission required, all the advisor or instructor or administrator would do is drop in that EMPL ID. Again, if they went into that page without knowing who the student was, click on the magnifying glass and it'll take you to a search page where you can search by last name, first name, or campus ID and drop the student in. And it shows you that he's been granted, it tells you, gives you the student's name, the fact that he has not used the permission, and an expiration date. The expiration dates are actually defaulting to the last day of schedule adjustment for the term. So if, in the fall, it'll be sometime in that first or second week of September, in the spring, February, and so on. If you wanted to change that expiration date, for example, if you wanted to give Joe permission, but you know that you're going to be bombarded with many more students who want to take this course, so if Joe really wants to get in, you want him to actually use it and register within the next 2 days or 1 day. You can change that date in that scenario. This is not where we would ask for people to override to let students to register after registration deadlines. It'll be very important that we don't do that because that still goes through the appeal process. We in the registrar's office don't override those either unless we're actually asked to do so by the person reviewing and granting those appeals. Now up here, you can see when we went into this page that there were some defaults here. This basically is saying that if I grant a student-specific permission here, if I give Joe permission, this permission is going to, by default, allow him in if the course is closed, if the course has prerequisites that he has not met, if the course is permission required, career restriction, which means if Joe is an undergraduate who wants to get into a graduate course, and this one we will not be using. Again, that would allow them to register after the registration deadlines. If you wanted to just say, Joe's permission is only, I don't want Joe to get in if the course happens to close before he bothers to register. Check that off. Requisites not met. Again, we will not be using that at Go Live because we won't have implemented the prerequisites yet, but that will be an important one down the road when we do have prerequisites in place and you want to give a student permission to enroll in spite of the fact that he hasn't met a prerequisite. Maybe you've verified that he's taking the course at a community college over the summer and it just hasn't transferred in yet to be in the system to meet the requirements, so you're going to override it. You would check that off there as an option. So that's the basics of giving course permissions. You save it. And if Joe does what he's supposed to do and goes back into his self-service and registers for the course, the next time you go into this page for this class, you will see Joe's status change to used. So you will know that Joe is enrolled in the course. So this allows you, it keeps a running list. You're able to keep track of who you have given permission to and whether or not they have followed up and used the permission that you've given them. And also just to point out, this particular case here, it's one section of one course being taught in the spring. If there were 5 sections of this course being offered, you would see this as row 1 of 5 and go through to the appropriate section if you wanted to make sure that you're giving the student permission to get into the section that they want to be in. Now that is the scenario if you have a student registering in a course that is permission required. Cases where you don't want anyone to get into this course without permission. The other scenario that we all know we deal with is when we have to make some kind of exception for a non-permission required course. Usually that case is going to be because the course is closed and you're going to squeeze in one more student and let them enroll in the course or however many more students. In that scenario, the permissions work a little bit differently. In this scenario, Joe also wanted to register for a course that has closed, and I've checked that it's okay to give him permission, that I can squeeze him into the course. See, this course was not set up as permission required. It's not a permission required class. It probably really is, but just in our database, this is one that's not a permission required class. You'll notice the difference here. You don't have that drop down there to drop in a student ID. That's because this is not a permission required course, and so it's not going to allow us to assign the student specific permissions. What you will do here, in a case where you want to give students, say you got moved into a classroom that had 10 more seats and you wanted to give permission to 10 students, what you would do is indicate here basically how many more permissions you plan to award. Hit generate. And you'll notice that you have all these permission numbers available. Basically what you do with those permission numbers is communicate those to the student to whom you are giving permission. So if you're giving Joe English major here permission, and he's the first one, you give him the first permission number, hit issued, save it. One of the things that came up in our Lunch and Learn demo on Monday about permissions is an option. If you wanted a quick and easy way to track that you gave this permission number to Joe, you can use the comments field here. You don't have to, but you can. And again, it's not used. When Joe goes back and registers, then you are able to see that will change to used, and you will see his ID and name populate here. So then if you wanted to, you could easily go into the comments and see that it's the student that you gave permission to. Again, you don't have to do that, but for people who have an interest in sort of tying the permission numbers to the student, that's a way to do it. And again, this would be the scenario for when you are giving permission, when you have to grant permission for a course that's not a permission required course. Because it's closed, another scenario may be because you're allowing an undergraduate to take a graduate course, you're a graduate program coordinator who's giving permission to someone in the combined bachelor-master's program to take one of the graduate courses that they're allowed to take. And when we go live in October with prerequisites alongside the major degree audits, a scenario where you don't make a course permission required because the requirements are being enforced through the prerequisites, but you want to let a particular individual in because you know that by the end of August he will have completed that math course he needs at CCBC or that kind of thing. And the system isn't reading it, or is reading it as he doesn't have the requisite because he's not enrolled in it here. So that's the very quick overview of course permissions. And again, we actually, and that pretty much is how the system works. We go into a little bit more detail in the Lunch and Learn session focused on them, but that's basically what they are. So that's sort of the very basics of looking at information about a student, looking at the courses being offered, granting, advising, clearance, and granting permission, sort of the things that you would do in terms of preparing a student to move forward into a new term and working with your courses in a new term. This particular instructor here also happens to be teaching. You can see I've really kind of loaded him up for the spring 2009 semester, but he also happens to currently be teaching. He's doing all this advising and prep work for spring 09 in the fall of 08, and now he also wants to go back and look at the fall. Just change the term, and we can see he's got an easier load in the fall here. We just have him teaching one course, but he wants to take a look at his class roster. And you can see it gives the course information and goes through a few things to note about the roster here. We are working to include some of the information that you have currently on the MyUMBC rosters that you don't see here. This is the roster as delivered, but it does show you, it gives you the student's information, the ability to contact a student or all of the students by email. Gives you the number of credits they're registered for, their level, and what program and plan they're in. So undergraduates and what their majors are. And again, I'm not going to do it because I think these may be actual real UMBC students here. But if I was, it was snowing and I knew I wasn't going to make it to campus and was going to have to cancel my class and wanted to notify all my students, I could do that as we do now here just by clicking on the notify and then the notify selected students. Now, this particular, our instructor here also wants to take a look. He knows he's got a wait list because in the class search he looked and saw that he had a few on there for this particular course. So he wants to see who's on his wait list. Just change the status from enrollment to waiting. Click the change button, and now he gets his wait list instead of his class roster. And this will show the same information. So he can see he's got two students on the wait list and what position they're in. And now we're going to fast forward to the end of the semester when it's time to grade these students. And that other icon there will take you into, instead of a class roster, a grade roster where you'll actually be able to submit your grades. The instructors on the roster, there will be an instructor on each roster who has a status of someone who can approve a grade roster, which basically means that this is the person who, once the grades have been submitted, will change the approval status from not reviewed or ready for review to approved. And that's the trigger that when we run grade processing in the registrar's office lets us know those grades are ready to go and they are included in the grade run. To submit the grades, basically just select them from the drop down. If you didn't want to complete the full roster. Now, say this was a course that rather than a final exam, it was a final paper, and these 4 turned it in early, and you've reviewed them, you're ready to note their fine. You can go in, plug their grades in, save it, come back and do the rest of the students when you're ready, as long as you don't change the approval status to ready to review or approved. Right, yes. And actually, if you are, a really fast person who gets all your grades done 10 days before the grade run, but the grades are not due until that period, they'll actually still post to the transcripts in one batch when we run grade processing. Otherwise, it would just be, students would be looking at GPAs and things like that on their transcripts that would just make absolutely no sense to them because your grades were in, but someone else's weren't. And if you do that and save, again, if someone could decide when they want to come back, okay, let me only look at my unassigned. I'm only going to worry about the people I haven't given grades for yet, and you can drill it down to just look at those. And then again, when you're ready, you just change the status to approved, hit saved, and your grades are ready to go. Questions?
I have 3. When you go to do a search on here, will UMBC 1 automatically populate, or will you each time have to?
Yeah.
So right now
you'll have the ability actually to set defaults that let you just
personally. So like if I know I'm only going to work in the spring 2009 term, do I have to go and do the drop-down box each time?
Well, that in the class search you do have to do each time. That's not one of the things that you can change by default, unfortunately.
Okay. When you set a week expiration date for a student, let's say, will the student get any type of notification that today is the last day to register for 3/25, or else you're
not as delivered. We are in conversations about ways to deliver notifications around permissions, whether those would be alerts or that particular question hadn't come up. What we have noted as an issue is notification that a permission has been granted. That doesn't exist as delivered, but we can take that into the conversation as well.
Okay. And then thirdly,
we put the date in with that, but I don't think we'll send another email. I mean, at some point that.
Oh, I agree, but I just didn't.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Sometimes though they want to register, but like I said, if they have a financial hold, but that's another issue.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure you have, but I just have to say this: has the system? Is it ready to handle the heavy periods? I know, like in finance and in HR. Boy, when everybody's using, when it's payroll day, when it's end of the month, processing will take an hour.
Chugs along.
Committed to have it collapse at any time. No, it actually made a substantial investment in the hardware that is what's recommended, and we're going to do extensive load testing in the February timeframe. There is a sliver of unknown there.
Sure.
That we got, there's a little bit of anxiety, probably larger on my part than on yours. But we're taking precautions. I think we're doing due diligence, and we think that it will be okay. In a web-based system, as you know from finance and HR, is never going to be as fast as what you have now, when it's just instantaneous. There's going to be that. But we're going to have to set the expectations. What's acceptable is a 3 seconds, 4 seconds, processing time or not. But we're taking precautions.
Okay.
Going back to authorization to enroll when you're advised, what we now call advisor verification.
Mm-hmm.
If I understand you right, you have to do that student by student now. You don't have the option we have now of, say, authorizing 10 students at once.
That's correct.
Well, that's related to the load issue, because if everybody's doing this at the same time and you're trying to get in one student at a time, I really hope you've got that fixed. That'll be difficult. But if you can get in once and do 10 authorizations, that is fewer times you're trying to get in. So.
Yeah, that's one part. I mean, the biggest hit is going to be when the registration opens up for the students. We're doing it here historically, not all students can go in at the same time. So we have enrollment appointments that lead that in step by step.
Right, that helps.
But that's all, yeah, that's going to be a big hit. That's going to be a big load at those particular times.
Yeah, I have two questions, both related to permissions, and one of them similar to hers, just kind of make the common case fast. So where we're granting permissions for closed course and so forth, it looks like the default is all the things are checked. And so in my mind, it seems like every time I go in, I'd have to uncheck everything except one. It'd be easier if none of them were checked and I just have to check one.
But you can manage the person, or the person sort of managing that course can change those to whatever they.
The defaults?
Yeah, the defaults will be able to. Yeah, all they have to do is uncheck. So if you know, for example, that you're only going to override prerequisites down the road, you could uncheck all the others and just leave that one checked, and it would be the default. And then if you chose also to give one student also,
right.
You could.
Okay. And the other is if you're letting a student into a closed course, and there's the code number that they use to let in. There's also a column there for the ID. Can we enter the ID there so that only that student can use that number?
Unfortunately, no. In the case where it's not permission, that ID, it doesn't have any ability for you to populate it. What the system does is populate it for you with the information about the student who does use the permission once they enroll.
If a different student uses the permission, can we kick that student out? Is that easy in the system?
Yeah, well, it would be contacting the registrar's office to have them deregistered.
I'd be afraid that would happen a lot.
Yeah, that was one of the concerns that we had as well.
And that's why we set up. We could have set it up that you would have to do the same process for also the regular permissions. We can set that up to look at permission numbers, but we recognize and we need to make that clear that you don't want to create a black market for permission numbers. $50 a pop. So,
well, I'm afraid that's what's happening here, though, because I teach a couple courses that always fill. So.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So you're afraid that students would come, a student who you would give permission would come to your door and say, give me the permission, and then they give it to his friends?
No. Here's what I'm concerned about. I enter permission for one particular student for a particular reason, and there are students out there trying to get in all the time, and one of them bounces in on that permission. Now, can I kick them out?
I mean,
but you just said it's not tied to the student.
But the permission is unique, and only the student knows it.
Yeah, the student would only get that. A student you didn't want in the course would only get that number if the student you did give it to turned around and gave it to them.
That's somebody else.
Yeah.
You have to develop an internal process. Are you going to print that list out and give the student a number, dictate to the student a number, give it to your administrative assistant? I mean, that's going to have to work out a little bit.
Thank you.
But it is tied to that randomly assigned number. You have to know that randomly assigned number.
And we give the number to the student.
You generated that and give it to the student.
Okay.
Yes.
But we have no control after that, so the student can give it to anybody.
Yes.
Other than putting the student's name in that comment block,
right.
And then later we could run something. It's hard to compare against a free-form field, but we can kick out what we think are exceptions.
What happens if a professor doesn't submit grades? Is someone in the department automatically contacted to let them know somebody hasn't submitted grades?
That'll be similar to what goes on now. I think what it'll be, but the difference will be
now is we have the paper.
It will be, well, but what I mean is it will be, right now there is a process that goes on in the registrar's office where they try to go through and determine what grade sheets they haven't received yet. We'll be able to do that in a much faster, easier way through querying the system, as opposed to having to, and hopefully be able to be more on top of that as grades are coming due and we know they're not there.
And for archives, for having a record of grades, will they stay in the system like forever? If we need to know past semesters, so we don't have to print them out and keep them.
No, they stay there.
Kim, you explained to us what to do if an undergraduate wants to take graduate level course where permission is not normally required, right? And we use that new process where you give them that special number. What if the student is an undergrad, given permission for a grad level course,
and it is required for everyone, even undergrads or grads. Is it a two-step process or just a one-step process?
So you mean it's also permission required? No, if a course is permission required, that's a good clarification to make about anything. If you have a permission required course that closes, or that you're also trying to let a graduate or undergrad take as a graduate, you can use the student specific where you're actually populating in the student ID. Because the course, yes, just one step, because you've set the course up as permission required. It's only in scenarios where you're trying to deal with a closed course or an undergrad and grad situation for a course that's not permission required that you have to do the permission numbers.
Will staff have faculty options? Will they be able to view faculty?
There will be an
Class
option
list,
for
or-
that, and we'll be able to sort of up front identify the people we sort of need to give that to at Go Live, like people in roles like yours and Bridget's, advising coordinators, people who in our current security setup for MAP have the ability to do these things. And it'll be similar, there'll be a security process going forward where, if you have a new staff member come on board who should be granting advising authorization, but who isn't a faculty member who would fall into that role kind of automatically, we'd have to request it and get them assigned to it. But yes, it'll be very similar to what we do now with enabling people who aren't faculty members, but who do some of those functions around advising, granting class permissions, and those kinds of things.
I had two really quick ones. You showed us how to give permission for permission required course. If the course has 6 sections, can we give them permission for all 6 sections, or are we narrowed to only 1 section we can give per student?
You can give the permission, you can go through each section and give a permission to the same student.
That's what my question
Yeah.
is. Okay. And wait, our department now doesn't have wait lists. It's a dynamic schedule when somebody drops the class opens. Is that going to remain the same with this system?
If that's what you want to do, yeah. If you prefer not to have a wait list and just because the one thing about PeopleSoft that's a little different from the way Legacy has been is if your course closes, you have 40 people in it and 5 of them drop, it automatically does reopen. So that does.
Which is a new thing.
Yeah. And that'll continue in PeopleSoft. So you'll be able to, if you prefer not to have a wait list at all, it's just at the schedule level, your wait list capacity is set to 0 and you don't have one.
And just to build on Amy, even though I could say this as we go back, as you said, it's for people like us who are entering in each of the courses, we actually have that functionality, and we are going to test it for the first time. We were actually able to talk our supervisors into trying this system out because
trying out the wait list?
Yeah, because I think it's
okay.
a good idea. I think how you guys have it run. So we were able to test some of for when we go live.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear that.
In the student auditing for the undergraduates, is there any reflection in that for faculty to show that they're in a BA MPP plan instead of just a BA or BS plan?
There's not, because those aren't actual approved and majors at the institution. We've had some conversations with the graduate school about how they're going to track those students, whether they'll put them in, but that's all still sort of under discussion.
I talked to Rachel in a meeting last week and said maybe we could set up a field to reflect a sub-plan for the graduate students that were just recently admitted, and the sub-plan would say that they're BA MPP. That would help us, but that wouldn't help the undergrad faculty advisors to know.
Well, and I think the only problem with that is because the student hadn't been fully admitted into the graduate school, we couldn't put them in a graduate school sub-plan.
Right.
And we wouldn't want to tie those to all of the undergraduate plans. That would be, so.
And it would still reflect those types of requirements, like 120 credits, which we know already is
Right,
not
no,
the case.
yeah, right. Right, well, so my only thing was, well, how does it reflect in that undergrad advising thing, the courses they took for graduate school? I guess it really doesn't. The other things are populating, but
If they had an undergraduate record, it would show up in the courses not used, or we could have a very
Right,
general
it might show up
courses
in
not
courses
used
not used.
list.
It
So
would be there, and then you can see the courses they've taken, and once they officially admitted to the grad school and the grad transcript starts, then someone in the grad school will have to say that course, yes, counts in that graduate program, and then it would be that would start showing up on the graduate transcript.
And those courses do count into their 45 upper level credit requirement for undergraduates, so they would show up in that requirement as well.
Forgive me if I missed this, but I got confused after one of the other questions. The default is that when somebody drops, it automatically opens up again. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct, yes.
Is there an option to keep that from happening?
No. That's how it's
The only reason it would not open up is if you had a wait list and you had people on the wait list, that class will stay closed until the wait list process is run. And then if the number of seats still isn't at capacity, then it would open back up for someone just in general to grab it.
We often have a case where we're having junior level transfer students coming in after the advanced registration, and we try to hold seats for them. How would we do that?
What do you do now?
What we do now is have it be permission required, and I don't fill it up. And I can still do that, but I was wondering if there was a way. We've also in the past not issued all the seats. There's been an option to only issue 8%.
And that's where I was going with asking you that question. There would still be the ability to do that. You could request, for example, and you'd have to communicate, with the scheduling folks in the registrar's office as they were doing the room slotting process to make sure they understood why. But you could say you wanted a room capacity of 40, but an enrollment capacity of 25, and then up that enrollment capacity when those orientation programs roll around.
I'd have to go in and change it at the time those students are enrolling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or give them permission. I mean, there's several ways of doing that. The other is if they're in a particular major, once as a prereq, you could actually set capacity. I want 10 seats reserved for English majors or whatever. The drawback to that is it's going to hold those 10 seats no matter what.
Right.
You can expire them later on, but so there's several ways of achieving what it is you want to achieve.
Okay, thank you.
In her case, though, where she was just trying to hold for new students as opposed to a particular major, that would probably be, but like I said, if you were trying to hold 5 seats for majors or that kind of thing, that would.
And you could do it that morning. The transfer day is today, so this morning, and it's so easy. It's one little field. You go in and say, 30, make it 35, and then hope.
But anybody can grab those 5. I mean,
well, that's true.
It's a free for all at that point.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, if you really wanted to limit it, for example, to student orientation, I know I'm going to give away 5 seats there. It would be having that capacity 5 lower and given the permissions during the orientation program while the student was registering.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay, well, wow, we actually finished close to on time. I'm really amazed because that was a lot of stuff, I know. Thank you all for coming.